India today has almost 3 million riders.
Why did you pick this and how did you come about making these bikes?
So in 2017, we decided that, we don't want to sit for placements. We wanted to build something in EVs and we're constantly looking for an idea. Our vision is that, by 2030, we want to create a mobility infrastructure in any major city in India where anyone can come from any remote place and can just start working for all these companies. There's no entry and exit barrier.
Did you need a little bit of money to, pay for both the team and the parts for the first prototype?
I think it was in March sometime when I just come back, meeting the Advantage team, having a very difficult kind of discussion where, let's say, Advantage said that, the plan that you're presenting is just on paper. You don't have anything to show us. We said, yeah, let's just change that. We decided on Friday that we want to build a scooter, and on Monday, within 72 hours, we had a scooter.
What happened next?
That's chapter 2, actually, of our story.
Thanks for listening to Zero to Momentum. I'm Raj, and I'm joined by Anubhav, founder of BAAZ. BAAZ makes EV bikes, but thanks for joining me, Anubhav.
Thanks, Raj. Pleasure joining in on this podcast. Yeah.
So to start with, what does BAAZ do?
So BAAZ, Raj, is a mobility infrastructure for the gig economy. So for example, we know that all the Zomatos, Swiggies, Zeptos of the world are growing crazy. And we are seeing that there are a lot of delivery riders who are in this market. Like India today has almost 3 million riders. And how this market is growing, it's going to be almost like 10 million riders by 2030. And most of these riders are either dependent on ICs or they're looking for an infrastructure because either they're delivering on bicycles as well, right?
Okay.
So what we saw is that, this particular market requires a dedicated mobility infrastructure, which is affordable as well, and that is accessible as well.
Okay. So just for our audience, sorry, when you say mobility infrastructure, you're talking about the actual bikes?
So vehicle, energy, service, all combined.
Okay. So the bikes, the service, and the charging, right?
Yeah.
And when you say ICE bikes, you're talking about the old
petrol bikes,
diesel two-wheelers. Correct. Okay. So you actually make these bikes and service them and give the infrastructure.
We build the entire infrastructure. So we build our own scooters, batteries, swapping station, the entire operating system to actually run this infrastructure.
Sure.
So that is what BAAZ is. So it's a full stack mobility infrastructure. Our vision is very simple. So our vision is that, by 2030, we want to create a mobility infrastructure in any major city in India where anyone can come from any remote place and can just start working for all these companies.
Awesome.
There's no entry and exit barrier.
Okay, amazing. So that problem is super clear. Obviously, we are all using these services. We see these, riders delivering us stuff. But I want to go back to day zero. How did you come about? Why did you pick this and how did you come about making these bikes?
So we started this company in 2019 January actually, and we all, me and my entire founding team is graduate from IIT Delhi 2018 batch. Okay. So it was like within 6 months itself we started this company straight out of college, right? Yeah. We'd never sat for placements. So this is also a very interesting story, Raj. So a lot of companies start with an idea and then team gets formed around it. We started in a different way. The team was there. We wanted to build something in EVs and we are constantly looking for an idea. I'll tell you in background why EVs as well. So we come from IIT Delhi. We used to build Formula electric cars.
Wait, pause there 1 second. Sorry. You guys used to build Formula electric cars.
Yeah.
Okay. And for how long were you doing this? So is this an organization on campus or is it you and your current co-founders who were building these?
So we did it for straight 3 years of our college, like 4 years. Out of 4 years, we did 3 years, we did this.
Okay.
And represented India multiple times in Germany. And that's how, the entire know-how of building EVs also came into play. So I'll tell you a little bit about Formula Student as well, what it is. So you must have heard about Formula 1, right? Sure. So there's Formula 1, Formula 2, Formula 3. Just like that, there's a format called Formula Student, where students build these race cars, students race out there, they compete with each other. So we used to compete with the world champions. So in fact, you'll be surprised to know that the world record of acceleration does not, it's not with larger automotive company, it's with a Formula Student team. Sure. Like 0 to 100 kmph in like 1.9 seconds.
Okay. So yeah. Wow, that's amazing. Okay. I didn't even know that there was a Formula electric.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So you were doing that for 3 years. And then how did you embark or think about making an EV bike for the gig economy?
So that's also a very interesting story. So in 2017, we decided that, we don't want to sit for placements. So we are 4 founders, me, Shubham, Karan and Abhijit. And so we decided that, we don't want to sit for placements. We had actually we are the very few people who know how to build EVs in India. And apart from that, because of this entire formula student thing, we also knew that we had a good social capital in our college, right? Though we didn't have money, like we are fresh out of college from humble middle class backgrounds, but we had a lot of social capital. People believed in us. For example, these guys used to make cars, they used to represent India in Germany. So they knew if they're deciding something, they'll do something good, right? So that's how the initial core team also got formed. So you'll be surprised to know that our first 10 engineers, we got it from IIT Delhi. No budget, no money, but we had our social capital over there, right? So that's how.
By the way, not to go make you list all those 10 people, but I'm just curious, what kind of a team goes into building a bike? Like very quickly, what are the most essential team components? What kind of an engineer do you need? What kind of, and I know the four of you were probably complete within yourselves to build that first prototype, but what goes into building a bike?
So electric vehicles, if I'll be very specific, electric two-wheelers are lesser hardware, more software. Okay. Right. So definitely you need mechanical engineers, you'll need electrical engineers, and you'll also need software, firmware engineers who understand software, right? Okay. So for example, let's say traditional IC two-wheelers, the petrol two-wheelers, they are completely mechanical. So everything, even a clutch wire even the throttle is a mechanical thing, right? You basically pull that throttle and there's a wire that goes onto the engine, it opens the air valve, and that's how the engine actually works. Whereas electric vehicle, it's completely a signal based thing. So for example, a throttle is basically a sensor which basically recognizes the position of that sensor. It sends signal to the motor controller. So it's a lot of software for sure. So that's where all these engineers we got on board, the electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, but from the same team that we used to work, right? Because that was also an electric car, but that was almost like I'll say 100x more powerful EV that we built at that time. There's also a very interesting story why we chose to go after this segment. We can cover that as well.
I want to come to in a second as well. But great, you had social capital. What's amazing is you already had a team that had worked with each other, building a much faster vehicle. And so you guys decided to do this. And did you need a little bit of money to, pay for both the team and the parts for the first prototype? Like, how did that work?
I'll say this is one of the very interesting chapters in our story, Raj. So when we started building this venture, it was never an electric two-wheeler. Okay. So we were building these electric powered shoes. So so this is also something that we famously say that we started as engineers, and then we turned into entrepreneurs later. So we were building these electric powered shoes that you can actually that can actually make any road more like a travelator, right? You're walking as well, and then the shoes are also powering you. So it's more like a self-balancing algorithm, very futuristic product. So that is what we started working on. In fact, we built 2-3 prototypes as well. There are some videos available on the internet. We were doing that in 2019, and at that time when we started reaching out to people that why you want to build this, I've already built a prototype, let's build a venture out of it. So that's where we met Advantage. And Advantage said ki you guys knew how to build a electric car, formula car, and you also knew how to build this, then that means you can build anything in between for sure. So that is something you're very comfortable on. So at that time micro mobility was very hot, right? And we are talking about 2019 when Bounce in US was becoming a unicorn in 9 months. So it was very hot in India. There were Yulus, Bounce, and all.
I was about to ask, so Yulu was already in the picture then?
Yeah, at that time, yes. Yulu started in 2017. So in India, there were 3 major companies at that time. Yulu was there, Bounce was there, Vogo was there. But everyone was taking their hardware from outside. They were all service companies, right? And we come from a very product first background. We knew how to build hardware in India. So that's where Advantage said that, if you can build a hardware for this particular market, we would love to give you some money. And we said, let's build a hardware. This also sounds like an interesting problem. We wanted to build something.
You almost the focus on that segment was like kind of a joint collaboration with the fund and you guys.
Yeah. So basically the fund came in and the fund said that, this is a very interesting market. What you are building, see, it's futuristic, but this has no market in India, at least right now. So we also, got back to a whiteboard and we saw, the only thing that we can do is we can go to US and launch this, but we don't have the money and the background to actually, hit the US market with such a product. So maybe, but that opportunity also sound a very interesting opportunity that, maybe if we can build the scooters and everything around it, it will be an interesting market for sure. And that's where we started this company, Raj. In fact, for example, we also did a lot of other, calculations where can we build a traditional OEM or things like that. And at that time, we realized that one thing is for sure that we wanted to build something in the electric vehicle space. But another thing was also very sure that we don't want to compete directly with the incumbents. One very strong thesis that we had at that time that, the incumbents are doing it for the last couple of decades, right? All the Heroes and Hondas of the
and
world.
when you say incumbents, you mean the
Heroes,
petrol bikes. Okay.
So I'm saying, let's say
By the way, and that by that time, whatever market the gig economy already was, I'm now saying 2019, let's say, was it 80% ICE bikes versus
it was
EV bikes?
95% EVs.
Oh, it was already 95% EV?
In 95% ICs, sorry.
IC, exactly.
It was almost 95% ICs.
Okay, makes sense. So it was only going to be natural that the efficiencies would come through EVs.
That is right.
Because I think you had pointed out earlier also that 40% of the cost for the rider was going in petrol and EMIs.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So when you say you didn't want to compete with the incumbents, what do you mean? Not by price wise or what wise? Because you were already different by the factor of it being electric, but what specifically do you mean?
I'll tell you. So this is because this is a more like a tactical workshop. So this is where the founder market fit comes into picture, right? So we realize that if we go into the traditional two-wheeler EV OEM kind of a play, we will be competing directly with the incumbents. And we realize that, for example, the consumer market is something that the incumbents know by heart. They're doing it for the last couple of decades, right? They've built their distribution around it. They know the customer very well, and they know everything about that market that we don't know yet. So it will be very unlikely that we will be able to compete with them. And that thesis is also coming out true very well today. If you look at the top OEMs, they're still the incumbents today, right? So that's where we realize that, let's focus and target a market which is a very new market. And when we look at this last mile mobility, last mile delivery, it was started by Zomatos and Swiggy's in 2016-17, which is just like 2-3 years has been passed, right? Nobody know what to build for this. Apart from that, it was such a different use case, right? So consumers travel for like 10-15 kilometers a day. These people travel for 100 to 120 kilometers a day. So everything changes. The use case changes, the ruggedness that you require on the vehicle changes, the uptime that you require on the vehicle changes. Everything is a different problem altogether. And apart from that, another very interesting thing, Raj, was that this was a niche. So no tier 1 OEM even was focusing onto this. And that's where we realize, we are building, products from first principle basis. So how about we start building products for this particular market? Right. And that's where BAAZ got formed. Amazing. And
and at that time specifically, you said Yulu, etc. And were they also building for this market? I'm guessing they were building for this market as well?
Yeah.
Or was the only common thing the electrification?
No, so definitely they were also building for this market, but they were not solving it from a product first perspective, right? So basically everyone was trying to solve it from an operations angle. How can we, increase the utilization via putting some operational efficiencies, via doing the customer acquisition better? We saw this problem more like, the products that are being used in this market are not the right fit. Because these are the similar consumer products which were built for that 15-20 kilometers per day use case.
So the big delta is that it wasn't adapted to this.
That is
120 kilometers. By the way, can we double click on that? When you say that product was not built for 120, what did you do different in that product? What does it need? Are you talking about the comfort, the durability, the efficiency of the battery?
Think of it like this. Let's say four-wheeler is a very mature market, right? A personal four-wheeler and a commercial four-wheeler look so different. And there are reasons for that. Like personal four-wheeler, it's designed for consumers, it's designed for comfort, it's designed for efficiencies and things like that. Designed for that 15-20 kilometers per day kind of use case. Commercial four-wheeler, on the other case, it's a very different ideology. It has to be rugged, it has to be having the best uptime. Comfort, you can compromise a little bit on, but you cannot compromise on the uptime of the asset. You need to have the entire infrastructure around it. So it's a very different ideology altogether. But because in two-wheelers, the commercial two-wheeler never existed, so people didn't know what a commercial two-wheeler is. And that is how we basically took the commercial four-wheeler ideology and put that into a commercial two-wheeler, right? So we said that our scooter should not have any plastic panels. It should be completely metal, just how, let's say, a truck or a bus is, right? Because when they travel, they don't care if something is, let's say, even a small minor scratch is coming onto it, because they know their vehicle is so rugged, right? And that is not the case for the personal four-wheeler, right?
Yeah.
So that's where we realize that the two-wheeler that we are making, it has to be very rugged, it has to be very reliable. We can compromise a little bit maybe on the comfort, but we cannot compromise on the ruggedness, reliability, and, for example, this entire uptime that the product needs to deliver.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So now again, to go back to four of you, that 10% team, the fund has now come in, strong founder market fit. What was your first, like, how much time did it take to make that first bike, that first design? Perhaps, and this might be a little hard because there were also fixed costs, there's the team, but how much did that first bike cost to make? And then what did you do next?
So this is also a very interesting story, Raj. So like, for example, we incorporated this company in January. We got an Advantage on board in April. Advantage is the first investor that came on board. So I think it was in March sometime when I just come back, meeting the Advantage team, having a very difficult kind of discussion where they said that, just how you said that, instead of renovating or, let's say, decorating your deck, where is your product? So we basically had that kind of discussion where, let's say, Advantage said that, the plan that you're presenting is just on paper. You don't have anything to show us.
Right.
You're saying that you'll be able to build a two-wheeler, but we don't see a two-wheeler yet. And I told them that, for example, you have seen us that we used to build cars. Now we built that shoe. How can you even doubt us that we cannot build a two-wheeler? But they said, but that is not there. So maybe we are not very certain that we want to invest or not. And that was the conversation in March. And this is a Friday evening. I got back from their place. We had a discussion. So we used to work from IIT Delhi at that time, right? So there was this place called Nescafe in IIT Delhi. So we sat there and we said, "Yaar, how can they doubt us? Like on the product side of it, they could have said, "Yaar, you don't know how to do business, you don't know your unit economics, but product, that's our core." But that's what they said. So we said, let's just change that. So it was a Friday evening. I texted Advantage guys that, how about you come on Monday, we'll show you a scooter. And that's how we showed them the scooter, working scooter, on Monday. So, like, for example, we decided on Friday that we want to build a scooter, and on Monday, within 72 hours, we had a scooter.
And what did you literally
I'll tell you what did we do. So what did we do is that we said that it's just a scooter, right? It's two-wheelers. It just need to have a motor. We have everything because we are working already with these things, right? But we just need to get something which can be done very quickly. And because we used to build those cars, I knew how to do welding, and I knew how to do all these things, like the technical, like a mechanic kind of a things. Also, I knew how to do, right? So we just went to this market called Jhandewalan in Delhi. We bought one of the most expensive kids cycle, because that kids bicycle had to take an adult's load. So we just went to that guy and said, can you give us a bicycle which is of a kid size but is very strong to take an adult's load? I remember that was the most expensive bicycle that I bought. It was $40-100. Okay. We bought that bicycle. We got back to the workshop. We just disassembled everything because we just needed some things from that, right? The tires, the wheels, that sprocket and everything we needed from that. And then because we knew how to do welding, we basically built the entire mechanical thing from that bicycle. And then we basically put a motor, and we had some cells as well. We just built a battery, and then we just built a prototype and then called Advantage that, how about you come on Monday? Like, let's show you a product. And they came and they said, like, this is crazy. And in fact, like, for example, what you just said, like, instead of decorating the deck, you should focus on building. That's what we did. And that's what landed us our first investment. Like, and that's actually a very interesting story. That's listed on Advantage website also.
Yeah. So you got that. That is in fact incredible. You got that funding in. And then what did you do? Was it like you were still perfecting the design, I'm guessing? So you build, one by one bike? So you build like 50 bikes? Like how did that
Yeah, so then almost like 6-7 months went into multiple prototypes, Raj. So that was definitely not a sell worthy
Yeah.
product.
Yeah.
But like then we built almost like 2-3 iterations to come to a product that we can actually deploy on field.
Okay.
I think by November in 2019. So we started in Jan. April Advantage came on board. November we had a product which we can deploy on field.
Okay. And
Yeah.
and by the way, while you were coming up with this prototype, did you also talk to customers?
Yeah, we were talking to customers. So we were constantly meeting Ulus of the world. We are constantly meeting other people as well. Because at that time, our focus was to actually build this entire infrastructure for these companies. They are already doing operations. So that's where we thought to start from.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Today we compete with them, but that's how we started.
Yeah, I was just about to ask that. When I was thinking customer, I thought you'll be like Zomato, Rapido, etc.
No. So at that time, we are focusing on last mile mobility because that was the hottest market.
Makes sense. Yeah. Makes sense. Okay, so then what happened? You had something that you could put on the street. What did it cost, by the way, at that time?
It costed around like 35,000 with batteries, the scooter.
Okay, means you are selling it for 35,000.
We were planning to sell it for 35,000.
Okay. I'll deliberately spare you and not go into like what are the margins there, what you make it for.
No. So like we were very naive enough to not even understand all these things at that time. Okay. We knew ki our scooter cost us 30,000 to make. Let's sell it for 35,000. This is how we started, right? Because we were engineers, core engineers at that time.
You would get the cost production down.
So this is how we started with. So like for example, I was saying November, this happened, right? We had a product that we can deploy on field, but there's no production line set it up. This is just a prototype that can be deployed, like a roadworthy prototype.
Yeah.
Right. But then we realized there's a big journey from prototype to production.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, so that's what I just want to go there. I know you guys are stellar product guys. I know you were trying to tell the fund that. Then you proved it by doing that weekend build. Even though you guys are great builders, now again in that spirit of tactical, what went wrong in this? Like you were like, okay, this is great. We can design this, we can build this, we can weld it. But later on, like let's fast forward during those 9 months, or even maybe a little bit after, what went wrong? Because when you start like producing this, you let's say you get an order and you have to put the first 1,000 in. What went wrong?
Things actually went wrong on that first prototype itself, right? Though we built it, it moved for maybe 5-6 kilometers as well. In the evening, we were actually meeting another investor at that time on the same day when Advantage met us. So we were meeting another investor, and though the investor drove the prototype, he loved it. But then one of our mentors, he took the scooter, like he said, let me take it for a ride, and then he took it on a speed breaker kind of a thing, and he came back with both the parts of the scooter in his hand. So definitely things went wrong in that first prototype itself, because it was not built for that. It was just to show the capabilities, right? The entire journey after that, for the next 6-7 months, it basically was on making mistakes, what worked, what doesn't work, right? So for example, thinking about all these things, because for example, if you're building a commercial grade two-wheeler, it has to be very different from a personal two-wheeler. I'll give you some examples, right? So in personal two-wheelers, you'll see that indicators are like bulging out from the vehicle, because that is about the visibility and everything else. As per the rules as well, that has to go like that. But on the commercial side, we ensure that, because indicators break very often, so it has to be concealed in a structure, though it's visible, but it cannot be vandalized and things like that. So all those learnings that we had in all those prototypes, and we kept building that. And then November came, so we were basically looking for if someone wants to buy it in bulk, and then we basically landed our first order. So think of it like this, Raj, like it's just like 9 months we have started the company, already got the funding, built multiple iterations of product. Our first order that came was almost like 1.5x of the total funds that we have raised from Advantage.
Wow. If you don't mind asking, what was the first order? Who was the first
order? It was a 1.2 crore worth of order. I cannot name the company, but that was one of the large mobility company who wanted to get into the last mile mobilities, just like Yulu. And they said, like, you're building it, I love your product.
And how many units was that for 1.2
It was it was almost like a 500 units.
Okay, 500 units. And by the way, out of curiosity, we don't have to name the company, but they were.
So 500 units was total, or I think this 1.2 crore was for 200 units.
200 units. What was their motivation? Were they wanting to try 2-3 different types of bikes in their fleets, or they had a very specific problem that only you could solve, or they were just trying to diversify away from their other options?
So they took some fleets on rent, and that's where they landed ki these are not working, let's find a custom built solution.
Understood.
And then they jumped onto us.
Not working, what exactly is not working?
It was majorly, problem is this, Raj. For example, let's say everyone in the market at that time was importing from China. Now we need to understand that, for example, there are some areas China excel, but there are some areas China don't know what to build. For example, let's say China primarily build its EV two-wheelers for European and American markets. Their infrastructure is 10x better than us. Their use case is 10x lighter than us. In India, the infrastructure is 10x difficult. People are traveling 120 kilometers on that same vehicle, which was never designed for that. So vehicles were breaking very frequently. The maintenance that was required was very extreme. And that's where they were looking for a custom built solution. And they approached us that, you have already built a product, you're focusing on this. How about let's just take a 200 scooter? So that's also a very interesting story. So they said that, but because they were well funded and everything, right? So they said that we will tell you the time, you tell us the cost. We don't care about the cost. We just want to hit the market with these 200, 300 scooters, prove that the KPIs work, and then we'll scale it up rapidly from here. So for the first order, we don't care about the price. You tell us the price, and but we will tell you the timelines of production, right? So we thought, okay, our scooter costs around 30,000 to make. Let's just tell them 60,000. Right? Double mein to we'll be able to figure out make for sure. So we just told them 60,000 bucks will cost you, and they said okay. I like, okay, but they said we want the delivery in the next 2 months itself. And we were very naive. We were engineers, right? We thought, in the 2 months we will be able to build it. It's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
We reached out to all the major, automotive manufacturers at that time. We actually went to Motherson. Because Advantage had a relationship with Motherson. So we went out to Motherson and said that, we want to build these 200 scooters, and the customer is saying that we want this in the next 2 months. And I still remember that line. There was Mr. Avasthi, who was the director of Motherson at that time. He said, Anubhav, what you are saying is too ambitious to say the least. We will need at least 6 months to actually move it forward to production. You're saying that 2 months delivery, not possible. But the catch is we still delivered them in 2 months. That's another very interesting story.
Well, how did you do that? We can't leave folks hanging on that. Did you split it across a lot of different OEMs? You make the whole thing? So
we went out to the manufacturers directly, the smaller manufacturers. We told them that why don't you build it? We basically split the entire bike into, let's say, 50 odd different BOM components. And so there was a laser cutting guy, there was a welding guy, there was multiple people. And that's how we used to build cars as well at that time, right? And then we took help from our Formula student team.
Got it.
That's a very interesting part. So we took a very small place in Faridabad because all these manufacturers that we picked up were in that particular area. And then we took a help from our Formula student team because they were almost immediate year or two junior to us. They were 30-35 member team already. We were hardly 7-8 people at that time. Right. And we told them that we need some help of you. We need to build these 200 bikes. Can you help us? Right. You just need to do one thing. You just need to come to us this and just help us in the night to actually build this, assemble all these things. You won't believe there was a time where, let's say, 3 Uber XL used to come from IIT Delhi. Those were our labor.
The gangs.
Yeah. So, and they used to come every day at night. So
you were 200 means you were putting together what, 20-30 a day?
Yeah. Okay. So they were 50. You think of it like this: 50 IIT Delhi guys, students, graduates, alumni, everyone. They're just assembling bikes at night. And then we realized that, at 2 in the night, because none of us were core mechanics, right? For example, some of the things that mechanics typically have a knack for, okay, why is this brake making sound and things like that. I remember there came an instant where we actually went at 2 in the night. There was this place called Bata Chowk in Faridabad, right? Which basically is a hub for these mechanics. There are a lot of, they repair autos, two-wheelers and everything. At 2 in the night, we basically went to that place and told them, is there a good mechanic here? And we basically got that guy on board on a thing ki, okay, we'll give you $2,000, please solve this problem for us. है ना? And this is how the guy came today. Because the relationship that we built was so good, he basically looks after all the mechanic activities that we do across.
But talk about all hands on deck, man. You really use that social capital and that fraternity to. So you delivered, needless to say, you just said you delivered those 200. They liked the 200. They worked. The product worked. They were durable, right? Hey, tell me something. How did the charging work at that early point? Now I know you have full stack charging, as we said, but
at that time also we had a swapping station. That was a manned swapping station. So there has to be an operator at that place where you can put the batteries in, put the batteries out. Okay. Right now what we have is an automated stations.
Amazing.
So people can do it on their own. Yeah.
It's like the circular kiosk thing, and they take a battery, put it in. That's right. There's no learning curve.
That's right. Easy. That is right.
Okay. By the way, who else does that? Do any of your alternatives or competitors also have their own charging and battery?
So on a whole level, there's no company like that, Raj. Okay. But on a part level, we compete with a lot of people. So for example, in a way, we are an OEM as well. So we compete with multiple OEMs. In a way, we are a battery swapping company as well. In fact, like we own and operate one of the largest 5 battery swap networks in the country today. Okay. So we compete with all the other battery swap networks like Battery Smart, Sun Mobility, in a way, right?
And you build your own batteries?
We build our own batteries. Okay, we build our own batteries, we build our own stations. We run this entire network.
And most of these parts are also from India, indigenous?
Mostly domestic. There are some things that you can never build in India right now. For example, all the ICs and everything. So those things we definitely import from outside.
Okay. So, and going back to those 200 bikes, what happened next?
So that's another very that's chapter 2 actually of our story.
Yeah.
in a one word, what happened next was COVID.
Oh God. Okay. So let's go to that. But what I want to I would love to. This story is so interesting. I would love to know the whole story. But unfortunately, what we'll do is we want to piece together couple of things that I'm trying to get to by asking you what happened next. One is, what was the biggest bottleneck? But the second is, when did you feel like, okay, now we have unlocked it? Like, we know how to do production, we know how to do mass scale, we have like an endless order book, etc. Obviously. But COVID happened. So I'm guessing everything halted and stopped for you?
Yeah, everything. The entire mobility got stopped.
Exactly.
So we were focusing on last mile mobility, and the one thing that COVID impacted was mobility. People could not move, right? So the entire market was down. For example, all the large companies, when I told you that Bird became a unicorn in 9 months in US, at that time, this was the market which started that micro-mobility trend. They got shut down badly at that time. And same things were affected in India. And we saw that this is not working, right? The company that was telling us that it's a great product, they also said that we can't move forward because now people are not moving. But at that time, we saw a very interesting market emerging, which was deliveries, the last mile deliveries. Because when people stopped moving, delivery started rising. People wanted these things to be delivered. And we realized the solution that we have made is also a very apt solution for deliveries, because delivery people are also traveling for a very long distances. They need a very rugged solution. They need the best uptimes and everything. And that's what the entire thesis we built that entire ecosystem from. So we thought, let's just start a quick pilot in deliveries and see if this works over there, because the market was definitely interesting for us at that time. And that's where we took it. Definitely, it was a very extreme situation for us as well, because what happened was that we raised money from Advantage in April. We put all our bandwidth and all our money into actually delivering that order to this company. And we were at a very cash tight situation. At one point of time, we had like $800 in our accounts.
Yeah.
And at that time, because it was COVID, no action was happening, especially for a mobility company raising funds in COVID. No, not a chance, right? And then, we had all these discussions where people are saying ki there's no point now, just, shut it down, move forward. And it was a very interesting scenario because we were very sure that we wanted to make it work, right? Because it's our first venture, it's a baby. Let's just make sure that it works, right? And that time when the entire world was, let's say, shifting to doing the work from home kind of a thing, we shifted our beds to our offices. We said we can only afford one thing. Either we can pay the office rent or we can pay the home rent. Let's just close the home part. Let's shift our beds to office, right? We can live, 7-8 people can live from here. We can build in the days. We can sleep in the night at this place itself. And that's how we spent almost 6 months of our life in the office itself.
Yeah.
Interestingly, it was an area which was dominated by Jat, so we didn't had a lot of legal issues as well. But yeah.
And you literally stayed in the office.
Yeah.
And then later, what did that same company come back at the end of that whole period? What was
no? So then they started focusing on their core business itself, because they also see that the mobility is not working, and then we also started focusing on the delivery side of it. And at that, the COVID was in a very interesting phase. It was more like a survival. It was a first interaction with value of death, right?
Sure.
Which is a typical thing in any startup's journey. But we were not very easy to give up kind of people, because that's something which was in there as a team. We did everything what we could do, right? So for example, because we were hardware people, we knew how to build things. So at that time, we the road runners that we used to build, the shoes, right?
Yeah.
We disassembled them to make a ventilator, because that was the only parts that we had. We said, like, let's just try to build a ventilator out of this thing, because ventilator is something that people want, and maybe we can survive with that. At that time, we had some scooters left that we basically were supposed to supply to the other company. We said, at that time, someone approached us that they want to start a tourism opportunity in Vrindavan. So we said that we have these some scooters. Let's start a tourism business in Vrindavan, because at that time survival was the most important piece for us.
So literally 800 rupees in the account.
Yeah.
You guys move into the office.
Yeah.
All these offshoot experiments happen to survive.
Yeah.
What is then your next big order once this phase is over?
No, so then we realized that, we don't want to be in a situation where we depend onto a company for our fate. Let's just directly reach out to the customers itself, right? Let's just directly reach out to the delivery people who are right now, doing deliveries, the riders. Then we started a very quick pilot, Raj, around 50 odd scooters pilot. We talked to some Kirana stores. We were in South Delhi at that time because we wanted to stay near the college itself. So we talked to some Kirana stores in Malvi Nagar and Saket. We basically put stations over there. Sometimes I used to sit on those stations in the afternoon. Some of my other co-founders used to sit at the station in the night, and that's how we run that entire business. And but because
we're onboarding riders right there.
Yeah. So it was only 50 riders. I was basically working on the WhatsApp itself. In fact, like today also I'm connected to all those 50 riders who basically helped that moving, right? And then we basically got a very survival capital. So this was also an interesting thing, because we didn't have a lot of money at that time. It was like in a company was in that 1,000, 2,000 kind of a rupees. We were somehow surviving. But then because we were from IIT Delhi, we had a network. So I started calling. I remember there was another kind of heated discussion that I had with some people, and then I came back to my founders again, and I told them that, guys, we are from IIT Delhi. Can't we even get some money in the company? What is this? Right. So we made a list. We made a list of all the 50 people that we knew from our college, because when we used to build those Formula Electric cars, Raj, we used to also get a lot of sponsorship, because that was a costly affair. Right. So in our colleges itself, we used to approach to all the Info Edge of the world, Hitesh from Info Edge, for example, Delivery, Sahil Barua. We knew all these people because they helped us to build that car. For example, Delivery used to sponsor us to send the car from here to Germany. Right. Info Edge used to give us some money to actually sponsor and build these things. So we knew these people, and just how I started reaching out to these people, and then Sumant Sinha happened. So Sumant from Renew Power, it's one of the largest power like green energy company from India. So then I reached out to Sumant that we are in a very difficult situation. We are building this company. Can you just bail us out from this situation? And we are in the market to raise maybe I think we are raising almost like 3 odd crores. And I told him that we already have someone who will give us 1.5 crore. Can you put in, let's say, another 1.5 crore? So he said, like, I really love what you are building. How about I put the entire 3 crores? Like, I'm happy to do it. Please do it. So that's how we got bailed out of that. We closed a small 1.5-2 crores round at that time with Sumant and another guy who basically came on board. And that's what basically put us into a breathing space that, okay, now we are back to business.
Yeah. And what did you do with that 3 crores. What did you plan on doing? Just increase the riders?
So we basically plan on doing that. We wanted to build this as a prove the business model. So for example, at that time it was a very makeshift kind of an arrangement, right? So we wanted to make it more like a business model front, that there has to be revenues that has to be generated, there has to be uptime that we needed to show, and all these things. We didn't drastically increase the fleet. It was like from a 50 to 100 scooters only that increased at that time, because 2 crore was not a major it was not the biggest of the amount to build the great hardware, right? But we wanted to prove that we have already proven that we know how to build hardware. There is a market that is desperate for this hardware. That was the core objective from that round. Fortunately, we are able to prove that as well, because all the numbers that we are making made a lot of sense. The riders actually paying us continuously for using our services. And then Kalari happened. Right. Okay. The Kalari was a first major round that happened, was a $2 million. And then we realized that this is something now we can build a really good products from.
Right. So it almost feels like all the way till that point, you couldn't hit like...
That is right.
Without break scale.
That's right. Wow, so Kalari happened in 2022 February. In fact, like the core journey actually started from that particular time.
Okay.
Before that, we were struggling with COVID sometimes and everything. I think COVID took almost like 1.5, 2 years of our journey. But yeah.
Yeah, but still, so 2019 to 2022, roughly almost 4 years where you survived a couple of these things, etc. I'm sure the bike design and you guys' comfort with production got better and better though over the 4 years.
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, any big so definitely there's domain specific expertise, founder market fit is super clear here. What's jumping out again and again is like that, not just you guys and your founding team, but that whole community at IIT Delhi building the race cars, etc. was very key to you guys being in a unique place to build this better than anybody else. Right?
Yeah.
Did you have to add anybody else to understand like production at scale? Like once that 21-22 period was over, was that also a big unlock, or you guys by then had become experts yourself? Like how did the team change?
I think some of these incidences when we started interacting with Madhusan in the early days, right, learning like for example how to do production, they helped us, exposing us to their facilities. So we used to travel to Chennai, see how the mass production actually works. But because the market that we are targeting, Raj, is that for example it's not a... So traditionally, the larger manufacturers works on a very specific cycle, right? They need projections for the next 6, 7, 9 months, right? And then they can plan their production and things like that. Because production is not like something you can decide tomorrow and stop it. And then you can decide tomorrow and then start it again. It doesn't work like that.
Right.
There has to be a very consistent demand supply thing, and that's how you can do the production. That's how the entire industry has been trained like. But we were very clear that we cannot supply those projections to the manufacturers right now, because we also don't have that. Right? The best we can do is we can tell you the next 2-3 months we want this. That's it.
Right.
And then we realized that we have to figure out the production ourselves, because we wanted to have more control so that we can quickly start, we can quickly go down. We need to be very agile on that particular front.
Right.
Because what happens is most of the work, so that's how we actually design our first product also. So in fact, like the first products that we designed, in fact, the products that you see on the road today as well, they were designed specifically so that they do not need any dies to manufacture them. So most of the manufacturing happens via dies. You have to invest almost like 2, 3, 4 crores into dies on day one. Then only you can build hardware. Okay. That is why the hardware is so capex intensive.
Sure. But
that was a very conscious call that we took, that we wanted to build that design that can be built by the universal machines.
Right.
So for example, let's say if you look at most of the other scooters, you see very curved panels and everything. If you see our scooters, they are very edgy things and everything, right? And the reason for that is this is built for the universal bending machines.
Yeah.
Whatever could be built with a universal machine, we incorporate that, because we never wanted to invest in dies.
Understood.
So that was one thing. But now when our businesses have been proven, now we are in a position, now we will build fancier, good looking designs and everything else as well.
In 2025, how many bikes did you make?
In 2025, we make almost like 3,000 odd bikes.
You made 3,000 bikes. And if you, let's say for anybody who's trying to tinker and build hardware in India, in mobility outside, in EV outside, obviously this conversation already has a ton of lessons on chronology and choices and team and all of that. But what would you tell them, or what is the one thing that you would do different if you had to change something? And what would you tell somebody new who's trying to build this right now, has not raised any money, maybe it's a very early team? What is the most important thing that they could focus on right now?
I think understand the market very well. What does the market need? Because what happens is, for example, software development cycles is very quick, and the cost that you spend in that is not a lot. But the money that you burn in building a wrong hardware is 10 times more than a software.
Yeah.
Right? And this is a very interesting saying as well, right? What cost 1 rupee in ideation, cost 10 rupees in prototyping, cost 100 rupees in production, and then cost, let's say, $1,000 when you've already scaled.
Yeah.
So think of it like this, that get to the ideation stage as precise as possible, understand what your market needs, what your customer wants, and then start building that. And then when you are building that also, don't need to be perfect it on day one. And that's why it's very important you choose an industry where perfect products doesn't exist. For example, if I would have been into a consumer EV space, on day one itself, my quality has to be superior to Heroes or Hondas of the world. But I cannot do that. And that's where I chose a market where, it was acceptable to have
the rough edges.
Rough edges and everything, but the product should work.
Got it.
So that is where you need to really choose as a hardware engineer. The market is also very important, which market you want to choose.
Did your customers, be it the riders, be it these other companies, did they inform your design choices?
Yes.
Quite a bit?
Yeah.
Okay. So you were close to them, you were talking to them. Even though you guys were the experts in building this, you took a lot of design input from them, at least in terms of their problems, not the solutions.
I think this is one of the biggest thing, Raj, like for example, while building any hardware, right, there's an accumulated knowledge kind of a thing. For example, today, I think our biggest moat in the market is the kind of accumulated knowledge that we have about this market. We exactly know what works, what doesn't work, because we have made so many mistakes ourselves, right? So, for example, in the earlier scooters, we put a phone holder. We knew people used to just steal that phone holder. Now we basically put a very covered, enclosed kind of a phone holder that people cannot steal. An outsider, when they look at it, they look at like, okay, it might be just another element, but that element has a story of 3 years losing my phone holders to theft and vandalism and things like that. And that's what it is in like as an accumulated learning that we have.
Amazing. Well, this was amazing. Thank you so much for sitting down and chatting, and I'm sure we'll do many more on these soon.
Sure.
Good luck.
Same here, man. Thank you.